Here's the first section of your script, crafted to be engaging, immersive, and filled with tension. The afternoon sun bathed the park in a golden glow, casting long shadows over the playground where laughter and distant chatter filled the air. A soft breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. It was the kind of peaceful day that made everything feel right in the world. David sat on a bench watching his 10-year-old son Jaden race towards the swings. His sneakers kicked up dust as he ran, his laughter blending with the sounds of children playing. A simple joy. David smiled, taking a sip from his water bottle. These were the moments he cherished, watching his son just be a kid, carefree and full of life. Jaden climbed onto the swing and pushed off, soaring higher with each kick of his legs. He was fearless, always wanting to reach the sky. David chuckled as his son shouted, "Dad, look how high I'm going." But then the air seemed to shift. A presence disrupted the harmony. A sharp, disapproving voice cut through the peaceful afternoon. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" David turned his head and saw a woman marching across the playground like she owned it. She was middle-aged, with stiff blonde hair and an expression twisted into disgust. Her manicured nails clutched the strap of an oversized designer purse, and the way she walked, shoulders squared, chin high, carried the weight of entitlement. Jaden, mid-swing, slowed down, confusion flickering across his face. "I'm just playing," he said hesitantly. The woman scoffed. "This is not for you, you need to leave." David stood up, his smile vanishing. "Excuse me?" he said, walking toward them. "Is there a problem?" Her eyes snapped to him, narrowing like he was something unpleasant on the bottom of her shoe. "Yes, there is. Your kid is hogging the swings and frankly, he shouldn't even be here." David blinked, momentarily thrown off by the sheer audacity. "It's a public park," he said, his voice steady but firm. "He has every right to be here just like everyone else." Her lips curled into something resembling a smirk. "That's debatable." The way she said it sent a chill down David's spine. He knew exactly what she meant. Jaden gripped the swing chains, his small fingers tightening. "I wasn't hogging it," he said, his voice quieter now. "There's another swing right there." Karen, because that's what she was, every inch of her screaming entitlement, let out a condescending laugh. "That's not the point," she said, her voice dripping with exaggerated patience. "Some people just don't know their place." David exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. He had dealt with people like this before, the kind who hid their malice behind smug smiles and clipped words. The kind who believed they were superior simply because they had convinced themselves they were. "Listen," David said, stepping between her and Jaden, "I don't know what your problem is, but we're not going anywhere. My son has every right to play here, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop harassing him." Her expression darkened, and for a second, David saw something else beneath her carefully constructed arrogance: rage. "Harassing?" she repeated, almost laughing at the word. "Oh please. I'm just trying to keep this park safe. We don't need any troublemakers." David clenched his jaw. He could feel his pulse quicken, but he wasn't going to let this woman get the best of him. "The only person causing trouble here is you." Karen's smile vanished, and her face twisted into something uglier. "You need to take your kid and leave," she hissed. "Now." Jaden shrank back slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face. David could see the way his son's shoulders tensed, the way his fingers gripped the swing chains a little tighter. "Come on, Jaden," David said, keeping his voice calm. "Ignore her." But Karen wasn't done. As Jaden started to push off the ground again, she stepped forward, placing herself directly in front of him, blocking his path. "I said," she seethed, "get off." Jaden flinched, his small body freezing in place. David took a sharp step forward, his protective instincts flaring. "Move," he said, his voice dangerously low. Karen met his gaze, holding it for a tense second, then scoffed and folded her arms. "Unbelievable. No respect these days," she muttered under her breath. Jaden, still hesitant, looked up at his dad. "I don't get it," he said softly. "Why is she acting like this?" David didn't answer. He knew his son was too young to understand the full weight of it, but one day he'd have to explain. One day Jaden would see the world for what it really was, the good and the ugly. But today wasn't that day. "Come on, buddy," David said, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. "Let's." Before he could finish, Karen reached out, and with a swift motion she shoved Jaden back off the swing. Time slowed. David saw his son stumble, his sneakers scraping against the ground. A sharp gasp came from a nearby mother who had been watching the exchange. Jaden barely caught himself, his face contorting in shock and fear. Something inside David snapped. He closed the distance between himself and Karen so fast that she actually took a step back, startled. "Don't you dare touch my son," he said, his voice now ice. Karen, still defiant, lifted her chin. Maybe now he'll learn some manners. David's fists clenched. The people around them had started to notice. Parents, other kids, even a few joggers slowing down, sensing the tension thick in the air. "You just put your hands on a child," David said, his voice dangerously controlled. "That's assault." Karen's smirk faltered, but only for a second. Then she rolled her eyes. "Oh please," she scoffed. "Nobody cares. You people always try to make yourselves victims." David didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He just stared at her, letting the weight of her words sink in. And then he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that made Karen's self-assured confidence waver. Because David had already noticed the phones. Parents, teenagers, bystanders. Several had their cameras out, recording every second of this encounter. A few were even whispering among themselves. Karen's eyes darted toward them, realizing, for the first time, that maybe, just maybe, she had made a mistake. David took a step back and folded his arms. "You're done?" he said simply. Karen frowned. "What do you mean I'm?" "People saw what you did," he interrupted. "People recorded what you did." Her confidence flickered, uncertainty creeping into her expression. She glanced around as if hoping someone would step in and defend her. But no one did. Then a voice from the crowd, sharp, firm. "Somebody call the cops." Karen's face drained of color. And just like that, the tables had turned. A hush settled over the playground, the weight of Karen's actions pressing down on everyone like a brewing storm. The laughter of children had ceased, replaced by hushed murmurs and the quiet beeping of a phone dialing emergency services. The air, once warm and inviting, had turned cold despite the sun still shining. Jaden stood motionless, his cheek flushed where Karen's hand had connected. His small fingers curled into fists at his sides, his breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. He wasn't crying, not yet. He was too shocked to process what had just happened. David exhaled slowly, fighting against the primal rage surging through him. Every muscle in his body screamed for retaliation, but he couldn't afford to lose control. Not in front of Jaden. Not in front of a crowd. He forced his fists to unclench, forced himself to breathe, forced himself to think. Karen, however, seemed completely unfazed. She brushed off her blouse, rolling her eyes as if she were the victim of some great inconvenience. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "It was just a little slap. Maybe if you taught your kid some respect, this wouldn't have happened." The words were gasoline on an open flame. David took a slow step forward, his voice dangerously low. "You put your hands on my son." Karen folded her arms. "So what? Maybe next time he'll think twice before mouthing off to adults." A ripple of disapproval swept through the gathering crowd. The weight of judgment was beginning to shift. People whispered. A few shook their heads. Someone muttered, "That woman's insane." A mother pulled her own child closer. David could see Karen noticing it too. Her confidence wavered, her smirk faltering for just a fraction of a second. But she recovered quickly, flipping her hair over her shoulder as if brushing off the tension. Then came the sound she hadn't expected. A voice, sharp, unwavering. "Got it all on video." Karen stiffened. Her head snapped toward the source of the voice. A young woman holding up her phone, screen still recording. She wasn't alone. Several others had their phones raised, their cameras pointed directly at Karen. The weight of a dozen electronic eyes pinned her in place. For the first time, David saw something flicker in her expression. Not guilt. Not remorse. Fear. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She turned in a slow circle, realizing just how many people had witnessed her actions. A small laugh, nervous, forced, escaped her throat. "Oh, come on. Are you people really going to act like this is a big deal?" No one answered. The silence was more damning than any words could have been. Karen's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted toward David. "You need to make them stop recording," she demanded, her voice strained with a forced calm. "This is harassment. I could have you arrested for this." David tilted his head. You're worried about getting arrested?" His voice was steady now, smooth like polished steel. "That's funny. Because I'm pretty sure slapping a child is an actual crime." She scoffed, but there was something brittle in her expression now. He was being disrespectful. A sharp voice from the crowd cut through her excuse like a blade. "You hit a kid." Karen spun toward the speaker, an older woman, arms crossed, eyes burning with quiet fury. Excuse me? You hit a child, the woman repeated. We all saw it. And you think you're the victim? A fresh wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Karen's breathing grew more erratic, her fingers curling and uncurling like she was trying to physically grasp control of the situation slipping through her hands. Then another voice. A man this time. Cops are on their way. Karen's face drained of color. David saw the exact moment the reality sank in. The moment Karen realized she had backed herself into a corner. Her eyes darted around, scanning for an escape. Then, like a cornered animal, she lashed out. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You people are all against me. You're twisting this to make me look bad. I was defending myself. David arched a brow. Asterisk from a 10-year-old? Asterisk. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You lost the moment you put your hands on my son, David continued, voice steady, deliberate. Now you're just making it worse. Karen took a step back, shaking her head. Asterisk no asterisk, this isn't happening. This isn't. Then she lunged. A wild, desperate move, one final attempt to seize control of the moment. She grabbed at the nearest phone, her manicured fingers clawing at the device. But the owner, a teenage boy, yanked it away just in time, stumbling back with a startled curse. Karen spun, wild-eyed, ready to try again. But before she could, a new figure stepped forward. Tall, broad-shouldered. Come. The man had been standing quietly in the background, watching, waiting. But now, as Karen's desperation turned physical, he took a deliberate step into the space between her and the crowd. Don't, he said. One word. Simple. Absolute. Karen froze. Something in the way he carried himself, the measured stance, the quiet authority, made her hesitate. Who the hell are you? She snapped, though the fire in her voice was dwindling. The man shrugged, hands slipping into his pockets. Just someone who doesn't like bullies. Karen's chest heaved, her breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. You should probably stop, the man continued, his voice almost casual. Because if you keep swinging, you might not like what happens next. David watched Karen's face shift. First confusion, then indignation, then something that almost looked like calculation. She could feel the weight of the crowd's judgment now, the inevitability of the situation pressing down on her like a slow crushing vice. Her hands trembled at her sides. She could run. She could fight. A new sound broke through the tension. Sirens. Loud. Clear. Unmistakable. Karen whipped around, eyes wide with something raw and unfiltered. Her moment was up. The police had arrived. The flashing red and blue lights painted the playground in shifting streaks of color, the sirens fading as two officers stepped out of their patrol car. The crowd instinctively parted, a silent acknowledgement that justice, however delayed, was now at the scene. Karen's breath hitched, her body stiffening as the officers approached. One was a tall, stocky man with a firm expression, the other a sharp-eyed woman whose gaze swept over the playground like a detective piecing together a crime scene. David placed a steadying hand on Jaden's shoulder, his son's small frame still tense with uncertainty. It's okay, he murmured. Just stay by me. Karen, on the other hand, sprang into action. Oh, thank God you're here, she gasped, rushing toward the officers with an air of frantic desperation. You have no idea what I've been through. She gestured wildly toward David and the onlookers. These people have been harassing me, ganging up on me. And this man, she jabbed a manicured finger at David, threatened me and encouraged these thugs to record me without my consent. David didn't react. He simply exhaled through his nose, watching Karen unravel like a cheap sweater caught on a nail. The officers exchanged a look, then turned toward the crowd. Is that true? The female officer asked, her voice calm but authoritative. A chorus of no's rippled through the bystanders. She hit a kid, the teenage boy with the phone said, holding up his screen. I got it all on video. Karen whirled toward him. That's a lie, he's lying. They all are. Her voice was rising, pitching higher, a frantic melody of unraveling control. The male officer lifted a hand. Ma'am, we're going to need you to calm down. Calm asterisk down? Asterisk I was assaulted, she shrieked, pointing at David as if she could will the truth into bending. He and his brat started this. I was only defending myself. The officers turned to David, their expressions unreadable. Sir, the female officer asked, can you explain what happened? David's voice was steady, unshaken. My son was playing on the swing when this woman approached him, told him he didn't belong here and tried to force him off. When I stepped in, she escalated. Then she slapped my son. Gasps whispered through the crowd again, the memory of that moment reigniting fresh outrage. Karen let out a breathless, disbelieving laugh. "Oh please, that's insane. Why would I do that?" The female officer glanced down at Jaden. He was quiet, his small hands balled into fists at his sides, his eyes locked onto the ground. "Son?" she asked gently. "Is that what happened?" Jaden hesitated, biting his lip. Then slowly he nodded. The teenage boy stepped forward again. "Like I said, I got the whole thing on video." He walked up, offering his phone. "You can see everything she did." Karen's face turned ghostly pale. Wait, you can't just." The male officer took the phone, pressing play. The playground was silent except for the muffled audio of the recording. And there it was. Karen's voice, sharp and filled with disdain. The slap. Jaden stumbling back. David's furious warning. The stunned gasps of onlookers. It was all there. Undeniable. The officers watched in stony silence. When the video ended, the male officer let out a slow breath before turning to Karen. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." Karen jerked back as if slapped herself. Asterisk what? Asterisk. "You just assaulted a minor," the female officer said firmly. "And that video is all the evidence we need." UNO. "No, this isn't happening." Karen's voice cracked with hysteria. "You have no right to do this. I am a respected woman in this community." The male officer took a step closer, voice unyielding. "Ma'am, if you do not comply, we will have to restrain you." Karen's breathing became erratic. She spun, searching the crowd for support, but all she found were cold, unforgiving stares. The realization dawned on her slowly, an ugly truth she had no choice but to accept. No one was coming to save her. With a broken, strangled sound, she squeezed her eyes shut, then turned around stiffly, holding out her wrists. The click of handcuffs snapped through the air like a final gavel strike. Gasps mixed with murmurs, but David only watched in silence as the officers secured her hands behind her back. Jaden exhaled softly, the tension in his small frame easing just a fraction. As the officers led Karen toward the patrol car, she suddenly twisted her head back toward David, her face contorted in pure venom. "You think this is over?" she spat. "You think you've won? You'll regret this. I swear you'll." The female officer gave her a firm nudge forward. "That's enough." Karen was shoved into the back of the squad car, the door slamming shut behind her. David finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The teenage boy chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, talk about instant karma." A few scattered laughs rippled through the crowd. David crouched beside Jaden, his voice soft. "You okay?" Jaden hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. I don't get it. Why was she like that?" David sighed, brushing a hand over his son's curls. "Some people just think the world belongs to them. And when they can't control it, they lash out." Jaden was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, a small, satisfied smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, at least now she knows she doesn't own the world." David chuckled. "Yeah, buddy. Now she does." The murmurs of the crowd began to die down as the patrol car pulled away, taking Karen with it. A strange stillness settled over the playground, as if the very air had exhaled in relief. The weight of what had just happened still lingered, hanging over the bystanders like the final note of a song that had yet to fade. David placed a reassuring hand on Jaden's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his son's breathing as it began to return to normal. Jaden still looked shaken, but beneath the initial shock there was something else, something stronger. A quiet resilience forming in his young eyes. "You did nothing wrong," David said, kneeling to his level. "Don't ever let people like her make you feel small." Jaden nodded, but his mind was still spinning. "Do you think she'll come back?" David exhaled, glancing in the direction the police car had gone. "Not anytime soon." A woman from the crowd stepped forward, her arms crossed but her expression warm. "I just wanted to say," she said, nodding at Jaden, "your kid's got guts." He stood his ground. Jaden blinked. He had never thought of it like that. David smiled. "Yeah, he does." The teenage boy with the phone smirked. "This is definitely going viral." David chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, if that keeps people like her in check, I won't complain." A sudden buzz from his phone caught his attention. He pulled it out to find a notification flashing across the screen. New video upload. Racist Karen gets knocked out cold plus instant karma after slapping my son. His eyebrows lifted as he tapped the video. It had already racked up thousands of views in mere minutes. The comments section was on fire. Asterisk, wow, I can't believe she thought she'd get away with that. Asterisk, That slap was wild, but karma came back 10 times harder. Asterisk, the way the cops showed up like the final boss, chef's kiss. Asterisk. David let out a breath, shaking his head with amused disbelief. Well, he muttered, that escalated quickly. Jaden peered at the screen. Wait, people are watching this? David nodded. A lot of people. For the first time since the incident, Jaden grinned. Guess that means the whole world knows what she did. Looks like it, David said, tucking his phone away. The rest of the parents slowly began to disperse, some giving Jaden encouraging pats on the shoulder, others shaking David's hand in quiet solidarity. The atmosphere had changed. The playground was no longer tainted by Karen's presence. As they started to leave, Jaden suddenly paused, turning to look at the swing set. David followed his gaze. You want to stay a little longer? Jaden hesitated, then shook his head. No. I think I'm good. David nodded. All right. Let's get out of here. They walked toward their car, the tension in their bodies finally beginning to ease. But just as they reached the door, a voice called out behind them. Hey. David turned, half expecting another confrontation. But it was the man who had stepped in earlier, the one who had stood between Karen and the crowd when she had tried to lash out. The man approached, his expression unreadable. You handled that well, he said. David studied him for a moment. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you stepping in when you did. The man shrugged. Some people need to be reminded they're not as powerful as they think they are. David smirked. I think she got the message loud and clear. The man nodded, then extended a hand. Name's Marcus. David shook it firmly. David. Marcus glanced at Jaden, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. And you, little man, you've got more backbone than people twice your size. Jaden beamed. Thanks. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then smirked. If you ever need backup dealing with folks like that again, let me know. David chuckled. I'll keep that in mind. With a final nod, Marcus turned and walked off. David and Jaden climbed into the car, finally leaving the playground behind. The tension that had weighed so heavily on them began to lift, replaced by something lighter. Justice had been served. Karen had thought she could bully and intimidate her way through life, but today the world had pushed back. And as Jaden leaned back in his seat, his shoulders finally relaxing, David knew one thing for certain. His son had learned a lesson that day. Not about fear. Not about weakness. But about strength.